Hello and welcome to the International Schools Podcast. My name is Dan Taylor.
My name is John Micton. Join us twice a month at the International Schools Podcast as we have conversations with international school leaders, educators, and entrepreneurs working and engaging in the world of international schools and education.
Now on to the episode. Hi and welcome to the International Schools Podcast. Here with my co-host John Micton. John, at a secret location. How are you doing right now?
I'm doing well, thank you. It's really good to be here and nice to see you, Dan. It's been a while. We've been all so busy and looking forward to this conversation. Just wanted to say that we have a LinkedIn now page for our podcast, and thank you. A lot of fantastic feedback and people are joining it. And also I want to thank all the people that send us these text messages and comments supporting us and also complimenting our guests on the learning that they're sharing. So that's always very encouraging to hear. The conversations that we're having are having an impact on various school leaders, educators, and audience members. So we really appreciate your support. I know Dan and I really appreciate getting the feedback and those messages through LinkedIn.
Yeah, we love it.
Messages are really appreciated. And thank you, because it kind of confirms that what we're trying to do is working, and I think it's important to have these conversations.
No, I mean, I think people underestimate. This is a bit of behind the scenes podcasting. Sorry, we'll get to our fantastic guest in a second, but when you're a small podcast like ours with a very niche audience, and we're not making any money out of this, there's a net loss financially for all the time we're spending on it, and we briefly had a sponsor, but we haven't even tried to. We've had people approach us, but we haven't even tried to monetize it. But when you get an email from someone saying, "Oh, I love this episode," and they talk about something specific, it's fantastic, and that is like the best thing about it from my point of view when people like it. Just people you've never met before.
You throw myself into that argument. I would like to throw my head and just say I have been listening to these podcasts, and I'm actually kind of in shock to even be invited, because the caliber of people that you come on to share their experiences and the impact that has on me as I'm trying to lead my little school here in the corner of the Czech Republic. It's huge. It's extremely beneficial. I feel like I get to get in contact, in touch with people who are really making some changes and to learn from them. And if I have my list, just the last episode with Dr. Helen Kelly, really informative. It was nice to hear the interview with Chip from International School of Prague down the road here, and everything in between. The three guests you had on ChatGPT in January that launched me into also trying to get my head around what are we going to do as a school in my location and with what I have. So sorry to steal the microphone, but
no, not at all. Brett, I think, Brett, what you're highlighting is I want to thank our guests, because they're extremely generous. They don't get paid for this. They do it out of their own time. And how often they're willing beyond the podcast to interact and support people. I want to thank all our guests for your generosity, because I know it means a lot to our guests that you're willing, because sometimes it's intimidating. If you're an expert in an area, or you've written a book, or you're a school leader. But I really need to compliment every single guest that's come on in their kindness and willing to share out. So thank you, Brett, for highlighting that.
Definitely. Well, I mean, I guess Brett's already said hi, so I'd like to introduce officially Brett Gray is the director of the Ostrava International School in east of the Czech Republic. Czech Republic's got a very special place in both mine and John's heart. I still live here. John had some very happy years in the Czech Republic. At least I think they were happy years. You've always spoke for
Yes, 9 very happy years. 9 years were wonderful. And my son still lives in Prague. So there you go. I still have a connection.
Yeah, and Brett got in touch recently. Now, Brett runs a small school in the east of the country, like I mentioned. So that's really interesting, because Brett, I don't know much about his background. I don't know much about your background, Brett, but what's interesting is you've got an interesting education background, and you've also started a couple of schools, which to me is fascinating, like a huge, interesting undertaking. So I want to quickly talk about your background. And then you've recently become an IB World School. You've gone full IB, the first school in the Czech Republic. I'm sure International School of Prague is devastated that someone's still in their thunder, but because they're going through the process right now. But I'd love to get into that. So if that's cool, Brett, we'll kick it off.
Great. So maybe I would try to paint the picture this way. I came to Czechoslovakia in January 1991 as a recent graduate of broadcast journalism and French.
Wow.
with no teaching background, but an incredible interest, a very deep interest in what was going on in this former communist country as it was transitioning from communism to we shall see. And for me, Václav Havel was a big hero, a big example of trying to promote peaceful change. And I basically came over thinking I would be writing definitive articles for the New York Times about this transition and teaching a little bit on the side. And I ended up at a Czech gymnasium in a small town called Bílovec, next to the third city of the Czech Republic, Ostrava. And I started teaching English. And I was fortunate enough to start teaching English at a school that had a great reputation in math and physics. And we had kids that I was teaching in the first couple of years who were great, super intelligent. They represented the first generation of kids in generations that could even consider studying abroad or even leaving the country freely. And their parents were very supportive of this idea of them trying to experience things that they really lost a chance to experience. And the first couple of years, I helped a few kids get into the University of Chicago in math, Princeton for physics. And I felt like my role here as a teacher, and journalism helped me a lot to teach in English. It just gave my life a lot of meaning. I felt I was participating in this transition from communism to some democratic principles. I stayed at that Czech gymnasium for about 10 years before I started to get quite frustrated, because I had the sense that what I was trying to bring and the effort and the energy that I was devoting to a kind of learning process that I had grown up with in Montreal, where I grew up, bilingual, open to the world, very used to people from all kinds of different countries and more or less getting along as long as we could deal with the French and English issues between us. I felt like I was struggling a lot with the Czech system, with the approach of Czech schools that 10 years after the fall of communism were still all about memorization, telling the teacher what the teacher had just told them, labeling kids, really no clue about well-being. That isn't even an issue or a problem for, I'm sorry to say, I think even Czech schools to this day for most of them. I did a quick count earlier today and discovered that in the last 18 years, the Czech Republic has had 15 ministers of education. I've met about half of them. And of course, that makes it absolutely impossible to create the kind of approach to create, to a national system of education that's in desperate need of transition. It makes that transition all but impossible. The longest
Brett, do you
serving
think this?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. Do you think this high turnover of ministers is because the position is not considered as an important position, or is it just because of the frustration of the bureaucracy, or maybe the strategy and vision?
I think it's all of the above, and I suspect it's probably similar in a lot of countries around the world. These are political posts, and the people filling them don't necessarily have a background in education, or particularly maybe even an interest in education. I can't speak for all of the ministers of education in the Czech Republic. I have met some that went into the job giving it their best. I've met others that really just didn't have a clue and didn't seem that interested in. And the school system keeps running whatever minister is there, but it does make it difficult for a state system to make that kind of change and direction needed. That, if we're all looking to Finland as an example of a country that 30 years ago made a decision and stuck with it through various governments to try to change and end up towards the upper end of the international testing system. So the Czech Republic just was as far away from that as you can imagine. And for me, that was really frustrating. So without dragging it on too much longer, I left the Czech system after about 10 years. And I spent 2 or 3 years working externally for the city of Ostrava and the regional authority. And I was translating and I was trying to present the city for its marketing purposes. And I was meeting eventually companies that were coming into the city and the region thinking that they might build a factory or move an office. And I was trying to tell them about this part of the country that I felt was a very livable and nice part of the Czech Republic, and to try to help them make the decision to land here. And it was difficult because, of course, one of the most important things that you'll need if you're going to bring over management teams and create a factory for 1,000 workers is you need an international school. And Ostrava didn't have one. And I spent a couple of years working with the city of Ostrava to try to create one, after realizing that we're in a real chicken and egg situation. There was no international school because there wasn't any international community to speak of. And there's no international community because they can't send their kids anywhere. And we even reached out to International School of Prague if by chance they wouldn't like to open some kind of a campus or extended school under the auspices of ISP. And in those days, there really was no interest, obviously, for obvious reasons. I then went into a project with the city of Ostrava to say, okay, we will create something here. And we tried as best we could to create a kind of public-private partnership, but again, in a legal context in the Czech Republic where that doesn't exist. And so we glued something together anyways. And I have to say, what we were able to put together was a Czech gymnasium. So this means that it was officially registered with the Czech Ministry of Education. The output of that school would be the Czech maturita exams, but we were allowed to teach a bunch of things in English. So at least a first start. A few years after that, I launched another school with some partners that would be a fully international style school, independent of the Czech Ministry of Education, where the output would be the diploma program and graduation exams. What we were trying to do, and we didn't have it so defined right at the beginning, but we wanted to try to have a Czech system where the Czech families would feel confident. A lot of Czech, they do some stuff in English, an English school with a DP output, and try to get these two schools to work together so the kids can meet each other. And the expats can have a bit of a Czech experience, and the Czechs can open up to the expats. Unfortunately, that really didn't work. It created all kinds of complications because both of the schools were kind of dependent on the other. We had a low number of staff, even low number of kids. And what started off as a great idea became practically really untenable. And now that I'm in this game for almost 20 years of trying to build a real international school in the Czech Republic, in this corner of the Czech Republic where there's no top international management, there's no diplomats, it's really lower level managers and locals. I came to the conclusion that I really can't try to have two schools that are cooperating with each other, that they each really have to serve a slightly different clientele. I felt it was a bit of a defeat. I had really wanted this to work, but I found that I was really not able to make a truly international school or the best kind of Czech gymnasium with lots to do in English. And so I abandoned that. I also came to understand that I think it's very, very difficult for students, and it's not in their well-being interest to try to do simultaneously the state examination, the maturita, and the DP program simultaneously. It's a lot of doubled work. It's a lot of pain and sacrifice, and it's just not worth it. It ends up hurting your final results on both ends. At
Brett,
least that's our experience.
When you were looking at this model of having a national model and an international model, did you go like to Germany? I know some German international schools have gone with that model. I know in Switzerland, in some European countries that's happened. Did you look at those, or is there something very unique about the Czech bureaucracy and the system that made it just not possible?
I think the starting point for us, so first and foremost, I didn't really go to other countries, to other models to see. I think in those days I was a young cowboy who just said, okay, we're going to figure this out and we're going to make it work. And I ended up knocking my head against the wall. Looking back, it might have been a good idea to test the waters or gain some experience from others. I think for me, the issue is that the current Czech legislation concerning kind of all aspects of what a school day should look like, that periods should be 45 minutes long, that there should be breaks at this time, that the emphasis of the whole project in the Czech Republic is still examinations that are fact-based at the end of the road, and actually no time for real skills development or anything holistic. And that legislation for those schools, and there are schools in the Czech Republic that really are trying to change. They want to be 21st century learning facilities, but in my opinion, they're up against a system that is just too inflexible and on the one hand, and also just leads you back to, okay, what have you memorized? What are the things that you have in your head that you can go then to your entrance examinations for the Czech universities and just spill back out onto the paper?
But I want to ask about, I mean, I think compared to the average person in the street, I'm relatively entrepreneurial, but the thought of starting a school would just fill me with such fear and dread. Like, did you do it just because you didn't know any better? Were you just like, oh, how hard can it be? Or did you really like think I can do this huge undertaking? Or did you really just not know what you were getting yourself into?
A huge degree of naivete and ignorance is an absolute foundation for trying to build anything like this, at least in this corner of the Czech Republic. And I would imagine for almost anyone in a similar environment. Ostrava is a former industrial town. It was the steel heart of the Czech Republic when I would say 10 years after the transition from communism to democracy, that's when unemployment really started to hit hard in this region. They were able to keep these big steel factories and mines alive for roughly 10 years after the fall of communism. But by 1999, the unemployment rate in the region was getting close to 18%. And I'm saying this because this was, on the one hand, a really kind of crazy time to try to start an international school. I started the process around 2002, 2003, but it was an opportunity because at that time, on the national level, the Czech government said, okay, we're going to be giving all kinds of investment incentives to companies that will bring in jobs and create factories and create work in the Czech Republic. And Ostrava was a hard luck case, let's say. It needed a lot of attention because the transition is so dramatic to turn coal miners into computer programmers. It doesn't happen overnight. And with that, since I was working with the city of Ostrava, with the region, I was meeting with companies like Hyundai that 3 years after we created our school, started building its only European factory. I was at meetings like that for the city where there was this movement of, okay, we can bring these companies in. We need this school. The city helped to create this public-private partnership in the first step. And that gave me the confidence of my two partners that joined me in this adventure to say, okay, let's give it a try. We have the city is backing us, so we're not going to bankrupt ourselves in this process. We have a bit of a pillow. What we didn't realize is that having the city declare that it will have your back does not mean that the political interests locally are not going to try to savage you. So that was another part of the adventure, because we represented something very different.
What was the issue there?
I think the biggest problem is that there was a feeling from the local schools that they also have some English lessons. After all, they had spent some time converting their Russian language teachers to English language teachers, so they could be an international school too. Their roofs were leaking when it was raining. They needed money. Why are you throwing this money out to rich people or to a private school? We should invest more money in the local schools. And the truth is, they're right. There should have been a whole lot more investment in education as a whole at that time. Yeah.
That's
so
fascinating.
That didn't go over well for some. Yeah.
And where is the school today? Because I want to get onto the IB stuff, because that's fascinating. How many? I know you're pretty small. What's the story today? How many students, and what kind of places do they come from?
Okay, so when we talk about the Ostrava International School, we have about 170 kids aged 3 to 19, basically one class in each age group, or one group in each class. So average is 12.9 kids per class. Our biggest class is 20.
Nice.
Yeah, we are small. We have, in terms of staffing, roughly 45 full-time teachers, a few part-time, and admin. So the ratio of student to teacher is very nice. And the nationalities, currently 37 backgrounds, nationalities and cultural backgrounds. And
these are
include... Sorry, go ahead.
But these are then the students from Hyundai. So you start seeing these companies coming in, like you mentioned, Hyundai 3 years later built the plant. So gradually, through attrition and through patience, you start having a market that developed for your model.
Yeah, I think it's very important to say we have a large Korean minority at the school. Interestingly enough, we don't have many kids specifically from Hyundai. Hyundai has most of their management and their kids in Prague, and those dads will commute towards Ostrava on Monday morning and go home in the afternoon. But we have a lot of the Korean supplier companies. Hyundai brought along 12 or 15 other Korean companies that make the doors and the windows and the motors, and then they pulled it all together in the Hyundai factory. And that, of course, is a big opportunity for a lot of Czech suppliers and suppliers from other countries as well. So we have at our school, as I said, a large Korean minority, and then a bunch of other smaller companies, many of whom are part of that overall supply chain, or doing other things as well. I mean, Ostrava has also branched out in a few other areas, not just automotive. Again, we have a trickle of, we have a small number of, let's say, kids from India, from France, from Belgium, and other countries. But we don't really have another huge industrial sector that's feeding us now. So if we're talking about what's a business strategy, for us, it's quite important to know that Hyundai is going to be here for the long term. We believe that they are. They're actually expanding into batteries and newer technologies in the region, and so we're happy about that. That provides stability, and there are some other projects going on in Ostrava that down the road might benefit us. And at the same time, we hope to expand interest within the Czech community. But maybe, Dan, to get to your question, I have to say we've basically been on the front line of trying to explain and share and open up the IB to the local community. It's a very hard sell in the Czech language.
Let's just quickly, could you just say, like, what is an IB World School? What is IB? I mean, I guess most people are going to know, but I mean, I think a lot of people work for schools where maybe they just do the diploma program or they do part of the IB. And what is the World School, and what does the whole program look like?
Well, I'll say what it means to me. it doesn't mean the same thing to all people. For me, the International Baccalaureate, the mission of the International Baccalaureate from the beginning, and it has been developing since 1968, since the first school in Geneva began presenting the
where John
program.
actually works, funnily enough.
I had the chance to do an EASC CIS accreditation there about 10 years ago, and it was a fabulous entrance into the foundation of the IB and where it comes from. And so where it comes from is a place of, look, we cannot have our kids going around from country to country, and every country they stop in, they're going to experience a state system that they don't really understand. We need to put some kind of a curriculum together that will allow children in this situation to have a fighting chance to do well and not have to start over every time they move. That first idea for me has grown into the IB's mission, as it openly and proudly declares, is to make the world a better place, to help improve the world. And what I really like about the IB is that I feel that there's a very honest effort to directly and openly say, so what does that really mean? Because it sounds really fluffy, especially if you put it in Czech language, make the world a better place and hold hands, have kumbaya moments. No, it's really a lot of hard work. And it continues to be more and more of a challenge as we all start to realize that making the world a better place really means looking at the question of equity, looking at empathy, working with burnout, whether it's your own staff or the kids that are coming from another part of the world. It means trying to behave in a sustainable way and to consider what's going on in the earth. All of these for me are embedded in the IB, in the IB learner profile, in how we want kids to be thinkers and risk takers and to try and to do something in the world, but to have a sense of what it really means to be in the world. An IB education for me means that kids learn about themselves. They learn to be proud of who they are, even if they come from a very strange and weird background compared to the people that are in their classroom. They should have a voice. They should be respected for who they are. And they should learn the tools to respect others for who they are and to be part of a communication and a dialogue. And again, all of these are very difficult things to kind of catch and to throw into a curriculum. The way you do that is through the methodology, through the approach, the way that you assess, the values that you put on various kinds of assessment. And so that's for me what the IB is. And the mission of my school, I think, very, very closely aligns with the mission of the IB. Now, you mentioned the DP before. DP is by far the most popular of the IB programs. It's the oldest of the programs, and it's the program that kids go through before they head off to university. And you were having this discussion a couple of months ago with Chip Kimball from the International School of Prague when you asked him, so how does that then conflict with what the universities want when we were focusing on 45 points and the academics of it all? And for me, this is really one of the struggles within the IB, because the real essence of the IB, it's easy to get lost in the DP program. There's lots of schools that just focus simply on getting points and pushing bright kids on through a point system and kind of not really focusing much on the other holistic elements that I was talking about before. And my feeling is that there are a lot of schools right now. There are, I don't know how many schools in the Czech Republic, 15 or so, that are offering the diploma program and, for example, the Czech Maturita. And I just don't feel it's a healthy or honest or IB approach to delivering the IB. It's a status symbol. And if you're the kind of school that really filters out applicants and you only take the best of the best, so maybe the diploma is a nice little cherry on top, and the kids can sail into university that way. But for me, the power of the IB is that, and at my school, is I take kids where they are. And some of them are just beginning in English, and some of them are great at math. And we're in a classroom environment together, and our goal is to get wherever the kids are up to the next level, and not to try to get everybody all at the same level, and then be disappointed in those who don't quite make it to the level that we had hoped for. I'm as proud of my kids who are accepted at the university around the corner in a subject area that they like, as I am of a student who was accepted to Columbia Law School last year and is happy there. That kid who was accepted at Columbia, he was smart. He came ready. The kid who was accepted to the university around the corner, we worked really hard to get him there, and we're really proud of him. And that's what makes us feel that we're a real school. You know, they both got to the next level, but they started from very different parts. So sorry for the long explanation. The IB is I want our school to live and breathe the best of the IB. Doesn't mean there's that there aren't lots and lots of challenges in doing that. When I listen to some of the other people that you've had on the show, I recognize that one of the big advantages that we have is that we are small. We can be flexible. If we want to change things, I can make it happen because we are a small group. I have no idea how schools with 4,000 kids and hundreds of employees make those important transitions.
Yeah, with great difficulty. I know. Could you outline, Brett, just for people who don't know about all that, what the 4 kind of levels are that make up the IB program?
Okay, well, at our school, we are considered an IB Continuum School. That means that we provide the primary years program. That's roughly the equivalent of most grades 1 to 5, sometimes 1 to 6, depending on where you might be in the world. Then there's a middle years program that takes 5 years. Kids are generally 10 or 11 years old and finish up when they're 15 or 16. And then the diploma program, these are the last 2 years of an IB education, and really a preparation for university. And the diploma program is organized in a way so that you can take higher level or standard level courses, and if you kind of know where you'd like to go and what you'd like to study, you can choose subjects that might give you a leg up when you're making those applications to university. And also, mathematics within the IB program is at a fairly high level, so much so that some universities will, if it's a general education requirement, for example, many American universities will just give you credit if you've completed the IB version
the DP is interesting. My brother's kids are going through this now. They're in 6th form at a boarding school in the UK, and that school does the diploma program and it does A-levels. And my niece, who's really, really clever, really struggled with the diploma program because you have to do a language, because of all the subjects. She did it. And actually, my brother took her out and put her into A-levels because it was like, okay, she can do 4 A-levels in all science and maths. She's great in science and maths. She'll get into a university. She'll get a good grade. She's going to struggle in like half the diploma program. And I'm not saying that's a reason to do it, because exams are definitely not everything, but it is hard. I know from a lot of people that it is hard. You need a breadth of knowledge across subjects.
And I think that, I think the holistic breadth and having to dip into sciences and humanities, and then you have the theory of knowledge, which is a requirement, which is all about philosophy and thinking. So it's quite broad, and that broadness also goes quite deep. So I think, Dan, your point's an interesting one.
Yeah, and Brett, as well, there's actually also an early years IB program. I really don't know hardly anything about it because I don't know many schools doing it. But is that I guess you don't have students that in the early years levels?
So we do. I have to say the early years is still a bit of a work in progress with the IB. So essentially, our early years center is a part of our primary program, and it follows the same units of inquiry, but of course at a very, very different level. I mean, kids between the age of 3 and the age of 6 are really totally different machines and require totally different approaches to the learning and getting them to understand some of the concepts. But it's possible, it's joyful, but it's not actually a separate program. the IB did come up with a somewhat separate program at the other end, and maybe for those students who really struggle with doing all 6 subjects, there's a program called the Career Program, the CP, and that's becoming, excuse me, more and more popular uh, at DP schools. We were also considering offering it, but my school is so small, it's very difficult to make that happen at our level. And
Yeah.
for some, it's a little bit more technically focused, but there's also very interesting DPCP programs for example, student athletes. There's a wonderful program in cooperation with the World Academy of Sports in Australia, made up of former Olympians who realized that, boy, when their Olympic careers were over, they had no qualification to do anything. They spent so much time as student athletes focusing on being the best in the world that when that part of their lives ended, there was nothing to fall back on. And they've made this decision to team up with the IB and to try to make it easier and more possible for students in that situation to actually complete a secondary school qualification and to be able to go to university.
Fascinating.
Yeah, and that's that's for me. It reinforces the IB is taking the education and well-being of students really seriously. At the
Yeah.
IB conference in October, I think the thing that had to be said and was said out loud repeatedly is that unfortunately an IB style of education is expensive. It takes money to provide, and by definition, then it's limited to either people or school systems that have decided they want to invest in that. And in our
Yeah.
case, specifically in this corner of the Czech Republic, we are not considered a part of the Czech education system. We are considered removed. We are the problem of another state or another accreditation organization. We receive absolutely no money from the Czech state. So everything that all of the bills that we have to generate it through school fees, and that is a limitation.
Sure.
So your finances basically are dependent on the amount of students that sit in chairs in your classrooms. That's the only income flow that you have.
That's the only income flow we have. And we often don't even qualify for other state programs, for example, for COVID relief. We just
Wow.
not labeled as a school. So, we just competitively, it's a big disadvantage to be in the situation on the one hand. On the other
Yeah.
hand, however, we have freedom. It comes
Yeah.
at a
Yeah.
cost. We have to generate our income ourselves. And unfortunately, again, we're in a market where local businesses really don't understand the value of supporting education. It's very hard for us to get, even amongst the companies that are paying the school fees for our kids, it's very hard to get them to sponsor anything more than that.
So
They
most of your parents get a stipend from their employer to go to your school, are percentage self-payers. So parents are saying, I'm going to make the financial sacrifice to go to your school.
I would say not most of the families, but we do have, I don't know if I were to say percentage, probably 20 to 30% of the families, depends on the year and what the companies are up to, have their school fees paid for either entirely or largely by the company. It depends on what the company is able to offer. The rest of our families, they're paying out of pocket. And we
Wow.
also really do not offer discounts. We're not in a position to, help support many families. We do, especially since we have the Ukrainian arrivals last year. We have now 10 Ukrainian kids. Some of them we're trying to support with some kind of discount. But other than that, we're just not in a position to be able to offer that. And we don't have the local corporate interest to build up some funds to
Yeah, yeah,
help
yeah.
bring kids through. Yeah.
So that's quite
Absolutely.
challenging to be in that situation where you have this
Yeah.
very tight financial income coming in and 70% of your parents are paying out of their own pocket. That's a huge commitment to the belief of what your mission is and what your school is. That's really interesting. That must be quite stressful sometimes, Brett.
Budgeting is always fun, but I guess it's the same for everyone. I think we've come to accept the reality that we will always be a small school, that our teachers will always be wearing many hats. We don't expect any opportunity for huge growth. And to be honest, I wouldn't really want to grow much bigger than we are. I'd be happy if we
Yeah.
moved from an average of 12.9 kids per class to 16 or 17 kids per class. If we could do that, we could pay for a whole lot more stuff. But where we are, I think, with the focus on the kids, on the belief in the IB, if we can maintain what we're doing, that will make me happy. At the beginning of this podcast, we were talking about some of the amazing guests that you've been able to bring on, and what they can share. I have to say, one of the lingering feelings that I always have is that we are really a small school trying to play in the big leagues of international schools. We are
Yeah.
really trying to incorporate and implement all of the things that we recognize are important, but it really is financially a big challenge for us.
Yeah.
On that
Brett,
note,
we're
I have to
actually
say,
going to
okay, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say the European Council, Collaborative Council, has a group called Small International Schools Group, and we're actually going to be talking to the organization, and they're really kind of amplifying what you're saying, is that a small school like yourself wants to provide a robust IB curriculum and activities and that community, but also the challenges that you have is having as faculties having to do multiple different tasks, wearing different hats. So I think that really resonates. There are a lot of schools around the world, I think, that have these very strong, important visions and missions tied to the IB, but also the challenges of being small and maybe in an area where there's not as much limelight or the spotlight's not often on, and doing a phenomenal job. So hats off to you and your community.
Well,
Yeah, Brett,
thanks.
I wanted to
I look forward
sorry,
to
Brett.
finding out more about that organization. That's
I will
another
send you the
discovery
details
with
to
you.
them. Yeah.
Okay.
Are you going to go to the ECIS conference, John? I was looking at it.
No, I'm not going to go to the ECIS conference. No, I'm
Okay.
not going to go. The leadership. But Brett, I will connect you with Jeremy, who runs the group. They're all small, tiny international schools like in Krakow and Belgrade, just smaller towns,
Mhm.
and in Frankfurt. It might be a nice way for you to have some people to lean on and also share some of the challenges and opportunities that you guys
That's
engage
great.
with.
And John, did I misunderstand? This is part of ECIS, this small schools group. Is that right?
So ECIS has what they call their SIGs. So they're groups, small groups on different topics, and this
Yep.
one
This
started.
is a SIG,
And
right?
a
Got
lot
it.
of the smaller schools were saying they need a voice, and we're going to have a chance to talk and hear about them, what they're doing.
Got it.
That's great. We became part of an association, an IB association, roughly 7 years ago, called the Association of Central European IB Schools. It was
Oh,
started by
cool.
Peter Murphy in Vienna, and
Uh-huh.
we've grown in the past few years up to now we're at 43 schools over 10 countries. And I
Nice.
know that amongst our members, I'm currently serving as the board chair for that association. Among our
Uh-huh.
members, we have some very small schools and we have some, bigger traditional schools as well. And through that network, we're really trying to help each other. But it is difficult for a school like Vienna International School to help out much in my particular situation. But we have a new member in Skopje and one in Kosovo and a bunch in
Interesting.
Austria and now Slovenia. And I find more and more of them are, they're beginning like we started 18 years ago, and they're committed, and they want it. They want to be part of that change. I would call it the Austro-Hungarian, the Habsburg countries are starting to move and want to
That's
get
so
out
funny.
from that history. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's a big
Brett,
ask.
how is it for you? You have been there for, I'm just calculating, over 20 years. You're a passionate educator. You decided that what was happening in the Czech schools didn't really align with your own pedagogic compass, and you decided to start this school. And you went through many challenges dealing with the kind of shift between public and private and trying to juggle those both. How are you, what keeps you going? What is the thing that keeps driving you, and you're so positive, and you're very passionate about what you're doing? What are some of the things that keep you going?
Okay, well, yeah, as you said, the plan in 1991 was to come for 6 months or a year and then move on, and that was now 32 years ago. I have to say, um, I'm doing this. I get a huge sense of satisfaction out of it. I want to create something that my own kids can participate in. But I would
Mhm.
say probably the biggest single driving force, especially over the last 4 or 5 years, that has helped to really bring our school to the next level, to really implement the IB the way we believe in it, and to really be a CIS and NEASC accredited school. Your listeners may know that's the Council of International Schools and the New England Association of Schools and Colleges. These are the accrediting agencies that really allow us to say we truly are international. I have to say the driving force behind really making the school advance has been my wife, Nikki, who joined the school about 7 years ago. She has a background as a lawyer, and I think we are a very powerful, dynamic duo. She lays down the law, the principles upon which we can then build our, I don't want to say dreams, but these the basic mission of our school could not have survived just on my best intentions. As much as experiences I have had with the politics and the economics of the region, I'm not by nature a politician or really a businessman. And she has really helped to keep our feet on the ground so that we can reach for the sky, if I can put it that way. And
Nice.
Fantastic.
because of that emphasis on what's important, on what our principles are, what we believe in, because in her ability to lead difficult discussions and to get them through to the other side, I really think that we've turned around as well our staff and our recruitment process, and the people that are a part of our school today, they believe in what we're doing. They know none of us always live up to what our mission is. We're constantly following and getting back up again and trying again, but they believe in the founding message of what we're trying to do. And I really believe that that's because we've started with principle, the why. We have a very strong sense of what we are and what we can do in our environment, and we want to do it. And the teachers that come to my school, nobody's getting rich in Ostrava, but they have a chance to have a real life, to really develop themselves pedagogically and to get to the next level and be a part of something that has meaning. I think there's a lot of people out there who are looking for that.
Sure.
Yeah,
Well, look,
absolutely.
Brett, I think that's a great place to finish. I know John's got to get back. Thanks very much for joining us. That was really interesting. It's fascinating to see someone who's actually started a school. Interesting to learn about the challenges of being in a small town with not much of an international population and doing the IB. So that was really interesting. How can people get in
Thank
touch
you.
with you?
Easiest is just write me at the school. The abbreviation of the school, it's the Ostrava International School. Our website is TOIS.world. And my email address then is Brett, BRETT, at TOIS, TOIS, .world. I really like also having the Earl of world. When those new options came out about 10 years ago, I jumped all over that opportunity.
Yeah. And just for our audience to know that Brett is kindly sharing some show notes. So he's going to also give his social media links and resources that you might like to tap into regarding the type of work that he's doing. So do look at the show notes under the episode.
Great. Brett,
and if I could, I would also like to give you a big thank you. What you are doing, whether you realize it or not, is also very, very powerful and helpful and meaningful for the people who are lucky enough to have come across the podcast. So best of luck. Keep going. It's worth it.
Thank you.
Even as you said, it's maybe not financially all that meaningful. It has a lot of meaning. So thank you. Thank you for the invitation.
Thanks, Brett.
Thank you, Brett. All the best. And good to see you, Dan. I think we get to see each other at BET.
Yeah. Oh, you coming to BET?
Yeah.
Fantastic. Well, I'll get you on the list for the Google VIP meetup.
I'm already there on the list, apparently, according to my boss.
Yeah. Okay. My daughter's coming in. It's a good time to finish. Yeah. Okay.
Anyway, lovely seeing everybody and have a wonderful evening.